everyone. Welcome to Conversations with Sekani, a podcast for people in their 20s who are trying to figure out life and not get lost along the way. A lot of people build businesses to make money, but some build them to change how people live. Today's guest is doing exactly that. Matthew Gardner is an entrepreneur on a mission to get kids back outside through a Maple-powered snack brand designed to reconnect families with nature. But this didn't start as a business idea. It started as a personal shift. This is a conversation about changing your life, finding purpose, and building something that actually matters. Matthew, welcome to Conversations with Sekani. It's a pleasure to have you here.
Yeah, thank you so much. I love the intro and excited to be here and speak on whatever I can to help listeners and hopefully ourselves as well.
Okay, all right. We're gonna be diving a little bit into your 20s, right? So you described yourself, should I say 20s or your early years? You described yourself as an unruly kid growing up. So what did that period of your life look like?
Yeah, well, first I should qualify. I'm still in my 20s. Um,
Oh, okay.
so this is, maybe we should check back in a few years and I can give you the full review of my 20s. But I can definitely speak to, the time up until now and what my 20s have looked
Mm,
like up until now. Certainly when I describe myself as an unruly kid, I'm really referring to my pre-20s years, although I think you could argue, my parents might argue that it extended a little bit past 20. But I guess what I mean when I describe myself in that way is, growing up from relatively young age, maybe 8 or 9, I was a little bit problematic in school and at home. I
mm,
found it very difficult to follow instructions, and I was always trying to push the boundaries of people's patience. And I think I was struggling at the time with the way that the world was and trying to find my place in it. I think as I grew up, I didn't understand why things were the way that they were, why school was structured the way that it was, why the larger system that I was kind of existing within was the way that it was, and I didn't seem to get straight answers from, people of authority around me, whether it was my parents or school. And so I ended up, being frustrated and lost and confused. And, at the time, I maybe wasn't having such clear thoughts and I wasn't able to really understand those feelings. And so it came out in these kind of behavioral ways. And, as time went on, I became more disconnected to my environment, and as a result, stopped caring about things and tried to, I spent my energy doing things that weren't productive as opposed to, applying myself in ways that would be, fulfilling and help keep me on the right track. So that kind of continued um, into my teenage years, and there was always this element of entrepreneurship that,
mm,
to one degree or another, kept me grounded. Something to focus on outside of school. Um, but it was really when I got to university at 18 that um, I think I started to really think about what my life will look like after this, because there was a
mm,
moment in university where it clicked to me that for the first time ever I was finally going to have some autonomy and some choice in terms of how
mm,
my environment looked. And I knew that when I graduated, um, it was going to be up to me how my life looked for the first time, because up until that point as a kid, you know, there's an external structure that you kind of latch onto, and your job is simply to progress from one year to the next, and everything is set up for you. And I think what most kids realize is once they graduate university, it suddenly dawns on them like, oh my gosh, nothing is going to happen now unless I make it happen. There's no structure for you anymore. And for most people, I think that's overwhelming and scary because they realize, gosh, what am I going to do and how am I going to do it? And for me, it was just exciting because I was like, finally, I get to choose how things look. So, um, yeah, that was kind of that process. And then, when I finally graduated, that was when I really took things into my own hands and it kind of went from there.
Wow. Okay. So, I believe you can actually give advice to people who were probably in your shoes then, right? So, for people in their 20s who feel stuck, or should I use the word disconnected? Yes. What do you think
Mm.
they are missing right now?
Yeah, I mean it's going to be so different for so many people. I think what helped me figure out, and everyone's mind works slightly differently. I'm quite logical, and so I like to kind of break things down to first principles and kind of build back up from there. So, the first thing I did was I put myself in a kind of hypothetical space where I had no restrictions at all, whether it was financial or social or emotional, relational. I just imagined that I was existing in a world where I could do anything, and anything was possible. And I kind of, once I was in that space, I felt like, okay, what is it that I'm trying to achieve? What is it that I want out of my life? And throughout my life, that answer had changed. When I was a kid, I wanted to be rich, and then when I was in university, I wanted to be, w renowned in some field. I didn't really care about the money. I just wanted to be like well respected and for people to see me as some kind of, whether it was a great businessman or a great writer or whatever it was that I wanted to do, I just wanted to be great at it. Um, and then as I kind of matured, I, put less emphasis on what other people felt or on money or whatever it was. And I realized that actually, really what I wanted out of life was to wake up most days, in most years and feel content and feel happy and feel excited for the day ahead of me because I just had never really experienced that as a kid. So really what I wanted was to maximize my well-being. And so when I was in that hypothetical space, I was able to like just think about what is it that what is my top priority? And my top priority was well-being. And then the question was, so how do I maximize well-being? And how do I build an environment for myself and a life for myself that is conducive to maximizing well-being? And so I think to go back to your question, the the answer is, I don't know what people are missing per se, but there's I think a way to kind of self-reflect and maybe through that identify what it is in your life that isn't lining up with your goals. But I think the first thing is setting that goal and that priority. Like, what is it? And it can be very general. I mean, maximizing well-being is a very general goal, but I think once you have that, then you can start to work through, okay, so what do I need in order to do that? And so for me, when I was like, okay, I want to maximize well-being, um, the first question was, what do we as human beings need to maximize well-being? It wasn't what do I as an individual need to maximize well-being? That was a later stage question. The first was like, what do we as human beings need? And so that kind of led me down more of a scientific discovery that was understanding the human biology and psychology. So, our it's like our history as human beings, so anthropology, a little bit of sociology and neuroscience, and just trying to like get a basic understanding of like what is it that we need as human beings to live well. And it was through that kind of learning which was really text-based, reading books and papers and all that kind of stuff, that I got to kind of like this basic sense of or picture of well-being, and some of those components were things like connection to the outdoors, spending time outdoors, being physically active, having strong relationships, good community, being stimulated, and kind of the really basic cliches. But the reason they're cliches is because they're true. They've just been repeated so many times that they lose meaning. When you say to someone like, you got to make sure you drink enough water, you got to make sure you get good sleep. Everyone's like, yeah, yeah, like, I heard that 1,000 times, and it just starts to not mean anything to you. So it was for me like learning those cliches through actual understanding and research, and then trying to think about how I can then build an environment that will help me meet those goals. So, one of the things that really came through was, you know, emotional stimulation. So, like, if you imagine there's a whole spectrum of human emotions that one can feel, hundreds of emotions, let's say, and you can experience those emotions to varying degrees. And what really spoke to me in my kind of learning was just how limited a range of emotions we experience in the modern urban living on a day-to-day basis. We really we experience so few emotions, and we experience them to such limited degrees. And so if you kind of chart it on a graph, we're really just kind of like flatlining through life. And maybe you have a big peak when you fall in love, or a big crash when someone dies. But otherwise, in between that, it's kind of just flat. And you get this sense of like the days, merge together, and there's not a lot of new experiences happening. And this is like not that this is an environment that's not stimulating to you and not bringing out like the full spectrum of human emotion. And so um, all of this stuff basically put me in a new state of like a new perspective on how I'm living my life now, which was a lot of screen time, smoking weed, not really investing in strong relationships, not exposing myself to new experiences, not sleeping well, eating bad food, and I think I was living a very kind of a life that many others are also currently living. And so to me, the solution was get out there in the world and discover how other people are implementing these core tenets um, of well-being. And, not everyone has the luxury to take 2 years and basically travel around the world and plug into other people's lifestyles. I used a platform called Workaway, where you basically exchange your food and time, sorry, your food and time, your time and your energy in exchange for food and board. So, you can they have workaway opportunities in like 160 countries, and you can do anything from teaching kids English to, working on a ranch in Patagonia to building cabins in Colombia, like whatever, just, tens of thousands of opportunities. And what I basically did was I spent 3 months in one place, and every 3 months I would change and I have a different job in a different place in a different country. And I was basically exposing myself to other people's versions of how to live a good life. And through that, I learned more of what I need to live a good life, because those basic tenets of well-being, whether it's, spend time in nature, that could look 1,000 different ways to 1,000 different people. And I think when you give that set of like, these are the things you need to live a good life to a million people, there's going to be a million versions of that. And it definitely doesn't mean, you need to live in the cabin in the woods and grow your own food and be some kind of weird hippie. And what was cool for me was that I got to experience different ways of living, and therefore it helped inform what I needed out of my life to live a good life. And that allowed me to kind of re-enter society with this knowledge. And like I said, that's not doable for everyone, but I do think that um, if they're able to understand themselves as a human being, as a biological organism, and how their environment is not necessarily working um, to benefit them. For example, the reason that exercise is good for us is because we are designed to move. That's part of our biological nature. Our bodies haven't changed very much, and neither have our brains in the last 50,000 years. But the rate of cultural evolution is so much faster than the rate of biological evolution that our environment has changed so much, but our minds and bodies haven't. And so just understanding a little bit about like your mind and body in a physical sense can help you then see like, okay, you know, I need to move because that's how my body was made to move. And when I don't, I start to stiffen up, I don't produce, I produce more, whatever lactic acid in my muscles, and I'm not releasing, important endorphins in my brain, and the whole system just starts to break down a little bit when you're not working with it. So um, if people can start by understanding themselves like that and looking at their environment, there are very small changes that can be made. You can live in New York City, and all it means is maybe that you are going on a walk for 20 minutes every day in Central Park. Like, you can still live in the most urban areas and um, make these small adjustments. And then, you know, the ultimate factor in your well-being is, of course, your relationships and I think your purpose. And so it's very easy to say, like, do things that fulfill you and give you purpose. And, maybe some people don't have the luxury to do that, but I do believe that people have a lot more control over their lives than they think. And so um, just learning about what contributes to well-being, and then trying to identify ways in their environment that they can kind of work with those things as opposed to against them. I think can take you a long way, and it kind of compounds, it snowballs. These small changes, over time have huge impact. So I guess that's where I would start.
Wow. Okay. I must say, Matt, thank you very much for this. And I'm curious, right? As to how you built the Maple Brothers, right? So the
Yeah.
idea for your business came through farming, right? So what made you see the opportunity in bringing it to the US?
Yeah, the idea was a good idea to create cleaner snacks for kids and families, which was, the original idea of my father-in-law and his best friend. And nutrition is a big part of well-being, and um, what they were doing is important, and it's great that other companies are doing something similar. But um, what I felt I could add to it, let's say, is um, this this mission of getting kids back outside. Because when you combine nutrition with the outdoors, I think you get a very impactful and more complete um, kind of impact, let's say. So, when I saw the products and the branding, and they were in Switzerland at the time. It's a small market. Maple syrup, it's a North American ingredient. They were spending a lot of time trying to educate people on maple syrup, which really isn't a thing in Switzerland, which is partly a good thing because it means there's opportunity and space in the market, but it's also a bad thing because you need to educate people on it, and that's expensive. And so we really saw the real market fit for the brand was going to be America. I think that's where um, there's maybe the most need for clean nutrition. I think the US is quite far behind in some ways on their food system as a whole compared to Europe. I mean, Switzerland by and large has um, pretty clean agriculture, and generally good, healthy diet. And so, we felt like with the combination of the need for it in the US, plus the size of the market, plus the fact that maple syrup is a known kind of ingredient and its benefits are known, that it was kind of a no-brainer. And they didn't have the resources or the time to kind of launch that company in the US, but I did, and so it just seemed like a perfect fit. I was already kind of thinking about the next step in my life and how to, build a career and build a foundation for my future family. And so I was looking for something like that, and this was just a no-brainer. So um, it was exciting for me to be able for them to give me the trust to kind of take that company and to infuse a little bit of my own personal like motivation and um, mission into the company and use it as a vehicle to kind of push this idea of connection to the outdoors, because that turned my life around, and I feel like it has the potential to turn other people's lives around, especially kids. So it's been a super exciting project, and we're really keen to see how this next year goes, and kind of understand the momentum of the company, and the kind of potential to reach as many people as possible.
Well, right. Okay. I actually believe that this company is going to reach as many people as possible, right? So, yeah, you spoke about the idea behind the Maple brothers, right? But I'm curious as to why you think kids today are so disconnected from the outdoors, right?
Yeah, I mean, there's a long history going back 10,000 years from, the invention of farming to where we are now and these kind of incredibly complex cities. Um, and we don't need to go through all of that, but I will say that there's some important changes that happened to humanity over that time. Um, when we started domesticating plants and animals, and we started to stay in one place, um, there's a natural kind of shift um, in the relationship between man and nature, because when you're kind of a hunter-gatherer type structure, you have to exist with nature and you depend on nature in the same way any other animal does. But when we start to tame nature and when we start to domesticate it, we start to very quickly shift in that relationship. So, as an example, my girlfriend and I, or now my wife, actually, I just got married, so I'm still not used to saying that, but um,
Mhm.
we started a vegetable patch in our house here in Vermont last summer, and up until then, we loved seeing the deer, we loved seeing all the little animals, because we didn't have once we started our vegetable patch, suddenly those creatures became for lack of a better word, they became an enemy to us because they posed a risk to our property and to our garden. And so it suddenly went from look at, the beautiful deer to, oh, sh gotta go get in front of the deer and scare them away before they come and eat our vegetables. And so it's a really profound shift. It seems like small, but actually anything that's not your food or the food of your food as a farmer is an enemy. And so animals that you once lived in harmony with, you're suddenly trying to kill and get rid of. And as we grew from small, agricultural villages into these, more sophisticated settlements, um, we just withdrew further and further from the environment. And in fact, we built ourselves an artificial environment that we can control and that is keeps us separated from the natural environment. And over, 10,000 years, that just compounds more and more and more to the point where, that environment is just foreign to us and we just see ourselves as completely separate from it and from those other animals. And that infiltrates every generation from there. And so, you get to hear, and most kids are afraid of the outdoors. They are like wary of it. They don't have any exposure to it, especially if you are um, underprivileged and you live in an urban environment. And so, um, what happens is basically families need to expose themselves and their kids from a young age to the outdoors. A lot of the time, if you live in the city, transportation is a huge impact to that. As part of our kind of charitable work is solving for that and providing transportation to get kids into the national parks and all that kind of stuff. But um, the more sophisticated we get, the more kind of technologically focused we become. And I'm very pro technology, but it is just a fact that we become more and more kind of immersed in our artificial environment and more disconnected to the natural one. And, obviously now that we've added a virtual environment on top of our artificial
Mm.
environments, it just becomes, and our entire kind of economy and therefore our time and energy is spent focused on this, um, this kind of these structures that we've created. And so, I have to sit in front of my computer every day and focus on, building this company because there's unfortunately just no other way to do it now. So it's very hard, and I don't think there's any way to turn back time, but it also doesn't mean that you need that spending your time on this stuff isn't worthwhile. It just means that you need to find a way to balance it out a little bit more and find some time to just get back into that environment which we spent millions of years living in. Um, and that, ultimately we were and are designed to live in. It's pretty clear that a lot of the kind of suffering and um pain that we experience in modern day existence is partly a result of the fact that our bodies and minds have not evolved to live in this environment, and we can't evolve quick enough. The environment changes faster than we can change. So we're always playing catch up. And we end up with a lot of addiction and depression and nasty stuff that maybe the tribes that even exist today, they don't have a lot of the kind of they have their own, it's not like it's perfect world in those societies either, but there's a massive amount of evil and suffering that simply doesn't exist just because they're living more in line with their biology.
Mm. All right, wow. Okay, I must say, Ma, thank you so much for this. And conversations like this are always so important, especially for young people who are trying to find direction and purpose, right? So, um, I want to ask this question, right? And I know we spoke about meaningful life, but I would like to ask you, what does a meaningful life actually look like to you now?
Mm. Yeah, it's a great question. Well, the number one for me and for everyone really, as far as the science is concerned, is strong relationships and good community. And I think that's one of the hardest ones, especially in modern life, which can be quite isolating. And we went from big communities to nuclear families, and then after university, we typically leave our nuclear family and we move to a new city or to a new place, and we just start a whole new life all by ourselves. Um, and that can be really hard. And so trying to find a good community, whether that's like could be as simple as like joining I don't know, if you like basketball, joining a basketball club and just trying to find some good friendships and ideally, a good partner and trying to find fulfilling, meaningful relationships, I think is huge. Um, and for myself as well, I don't need, 1,000 friends. I really just need a few really good quality relationships, and I'm very happy. And then, the second thing for me for sure is um, really about how I spend my time. And I can't spend my time on things that don't get me excited and energize me and make me feel like what I'm doing is worthwhile. I think that's something that a lot of people don't have. And I think that just sucks the life out of someone. So for me, it's all about uh, spending time on things that I care about and that are meaningful and being around people that that are fulfilling and kind of loving. So those are the two most important things. And then ideally doing all of those things in a really beautiful natural environment. That's the cherry on top. Um, but yeah, yeah.
All right. Okay, Ma. Thank you for that beautiful explanation. And finally, I believe you got into the point where you can actually give advice to people who are currently in need of a very good advice as regards to direction and purpose, right? So for someone in their 20s trying to find direction, purpose, and something that feels real, what is one
Yeah.
shift that can change everything for them?
I think it's a mindset shift. And I guess the
Mm.
mindset shift is don't be afraid to be bold and um, to not be afraid to take risk and maybe to have more confidence in yourself, um, to kind of just take life by the balls, so to speak, and to just go for it. I think a lot of people put too many restrictions on themselves um, and there are of course certain restrictions, but ultimately I think you need to have the confidence and the kind of risk on mentality to just go for it and to not feel like this is the way that life is and you simply have to just take it at face value and you're not capable of the kind of life that you want. I think that that's partly an effect of school and it's so destructive, but we are so capable. Every human being is so capable, um, and of so much more than they think that they are. And I just think that you've just got to go for it and yeah, be bold.
All right, people. Okay. Thank you so much, Ma. This has been amazing, I must say. And it brings me to the final segment of my podcast. It's called the Rapid Fire segment.
No, no.
Oh, I'm sure you do. I'm sure you do really well. Okay,
Okay.
so starting now, adventure or stability?
Adventure,
Okay. Freedom or structure?
freedom,
Hmm. Nature or technology?
nature,
What is one word for your past self?
lost,
Hmm. What is one word for your mission now?
adventure.
You see, you did amazing.
That
All right. My place
was
has
fun.
been, yeah, this has been fun actually. Where can listeners connect with you and particularly get to know more about your work?
Well, for my work, you can find us on Instagram at the Maple Brothers USA.
Mhm.
We also have a website which is themaplebrothers.com. And then, if anyone wants to reach out to me personally, I guess you can find me on Instagram as well at m.att.g. Um, but yeah, always happy to connect and learn what other people are up to and how other people are living their lives. It's always super cool.
Okay, all right, Matt. Thank you so much. And heads up, right? I'm gonna be reaching out via Instagram. I think I am to follow your the Maples Brother dot USA, right?
Just the Maple Brothers USA, no dot.
USA. Okay, okay. All right. So I'm gonna
Yeah.
be following the handle immediately after this.
Thanks, Joe. I
Okay.
appreciate it.
Yeah, this has been amazing actually. And talking about the outside life, I don't know if you've experienced Africa, right? I think you should add that to your list.
I have. I love it.
Oh, okay, that's
Yeah.
cool. All right. Okay, Matt,
I was
thank you.
just in I was just in
Yeah.
Zimbabwe actually and Tanzania. Very, very pretty.
Okay. All right, Matt, this has been amazing. And this is to my listeners. Thanks for tuning in to Conversations with Sekani. If this episode sparked something in you, just as it did in me, make sure to share to someone who you think might need this and also subscribe so you don't miss out on new episodes. All right, Matt, thank you so much. This has been amazing and do have a wonderful day ahead of you.
Thanks, Joy. I appreciate your time. Thanks so much.
All right, bye.
Bye bye.